What we teach children over time, when we teach them that their feelings don't matter, that their joy in something that's considered not gender specific, that is not permitted. Your joy does not matter. Your feelings do not matter. Your fear and your pain and your sadness must be hidden. When we teach that to our children, these are dominant messages that we teach our boys, what we are teaching them is that the only way to meet your needs is at the expense of somebody else. The reality is, if you know what your needs are, and you can guess at what the needs of another person might be, we can come up with really creative strategies that satisfy both of us, even when we're drunk. The young men who had the empathy training were better able to engage in empathy when they were drunk. And this is a critical piece of information, because the young women that I worked with said that that's when most of the violence happens, when people have had their inhibitions removed or interfered with through some kind of a substance, or through the adrenaline and cortisols that run through your own body when you're in a state of heightened arousal through fear or distress. We need to support our youth so that they have the skills that allow them to navigate those moments of compromised brain function, so that they have the skills to move through those moments with empathy and care, so that they can develop strategies together with other people to meet the needs between them, rather than acting out of that compromised state and grabbing for their needs at the expense, sometimes at the tragic expense of somebody else. And so I would say that this is a core learning that we are missing in the education of our young men, and I believe also in the education of our young women. Almost all the people who do cause abuse were people who were physically harmed. The same thing is true with sexual harm and with other forms of emotional and social violence in our community, that unless we learn to name and identify what that harm is and how it lives in us, we are vulnerable to repeating that harm. And we're particularly vulnerable to repeating that harm when we're tired, when we're hungry, when we're overwhelmed with other responsibilities. That's when those old patterns sometimes come out of us, even though we maybe swore to never ever do a certain thing. If I know what my need is, I can find cooperation with my partner, with a sibling, with a friend, taking my dog for a walk. There are a million different ways I can meet my need for cooperation. The difference between grabbing at things and sharing things. And so when we grab at a toy, we're taking, we're not thinking about the other person. And when we share the toy, we're taking turns. We're respecting, there's mutual respect. Well, we do that same thing with our language. And we can begin teaching that quite early on and continue teaching it all the way through adolescence. That when we see something we enjoy, instead of catcalling, we don't catcall at a flower. We say, oh, wow, this flower is so beautiful. I feel so good when I look at this flower. There's a difference between saying you're anything. Any labeling and blaming often has shame associated with it, even if it's so-called positive labeling and blaming. When we point a finger and we say you're a thing, a good thing, a bad thing, we're making an object out of somebody. We're grabbing. We're taking our enjoyment at somebody else's expense. If instead we say, oh my gosh, when I see you, I just feel so good, and I just want you to know how much I like to look at you, or how much I enjoy being in your company. So instead of saying you're so pretty, we say I see this and I have this response. Then we're teaching our boys to celebrate the beauty that they see around them. And we're teaching them to do it in a way that's life-affirming, that actually lifts up and honors the person that they admire, rather than teaching our little boys to throw stones because they like somebody. So when we tolerate this idea of girls have cooties and throwing stones, that is a very short trip from throwing stones and girls have cooties to sexual assault. It doesn't seem like it's related, but it's along the same spectrum. A whole different dialogue, a whole different spectrum is the spectrum of saying, I feel fuzzy and warm when I sit beside Sally. And that is on a spectrum that leads to a young adult that says, oh, Susie, when I sit next to you, I just am so happy, and I'm just glad you're in the world. That is a dialogue that's going to begin actual intimacy, whether it's friendship or whether it's romantic or whether it's a sexual encounter. It's going to be mutually respectful. And that's what we want to be teaching our boys, how to appreciate and celebrate rather than how to grab and throw stones.